listening to Cosmic Cousins Soul-Centered Astrology. I am your host, Jeff Hinshaw. Thanks for tuning in. Cosmic Cousins is dedicated to honoring the interconnectedness of our universal family through embodied health, self-discovery, and deeper learning. And it is here to bring you back into alignment with the cosmos. So thank you for being here as always. Hey Cosmic Cousins, welcome back to another week of the show. This is our sacred Virgo New Moon gathering. And on this episode, we'll dive deep into the invitation of the Virgo archetype. We're also going to connect to the many ruling planets for Virgo. Traditionally, Virgo is ruled by Mercury, but depending on what denomination of astrology you're practicing, Virgo is also connected to many planetoids and asteroids, including Chiron, Ceres, Vesta, and more. So we'll get into that today. So, hi, welcome. This is Jeff Hinshaw. I'm an intuitive astrologer and tarot reader interested in embodied health. So I have a Virgo moon. This is where the health focus comes for me as a practitioner. So let's get into it. Each time that we gather, it's on the new and the full moon, and I'll always offer you 3 phrases that help us connect to the energy of the lunation. So for this Virgo new moon, the phrases we have here are I serve, I refine, I heal. I serve, I refine, I heal. So you may find that you'd like to write these down and elaborate on them. For some of you, I know that you like to pull tarot cards for each of these phrases. I think that that's always a nice opportunity on the Virgo new moon. Virgo really benefits from a tarot practice because it is physical. Virgo likes to hold things in their hand, and particularly things that are smaller, small objects. I think of like collecting crystals and seashells, things like that. But anything that also helps build a bridge between the body, mind, and spirit. This is really helpful for Virgo, and I think that a tarot practice and altar building can do that. Because Virgo, in maybe it's a shadow expression, but it is also one of Virgo's gift, is the ability to separate body from mind, from spirit. There is this discernment and ability to organize. So that separation of body, mind, and spirit can also be a detriment to Virgo too, because it can mean that Virgo compartmentalizes their trauma to the point that they start to have an illness or some sort of dis-ease to the overall system. It's like a Virgo that is working. You know, Virgo is a sign of work and health, working all the time and not listening to their body because of that. Then health things may arise for Virgo, which is saying, hey, Virgo, you're living in your mind. Let's bring it back to the body. And I think this is part of the complexity of Virgo being an earth sign that is mutable, which means it's changeable and adaptable. And it's also an earth sign ruled by Mercury, the planet of communication. So building a bridge between the body, earth, and the mind, Mercury, is part of Virgo's soul gifts. And it's something that we might be learning here this Virgo season, and particularly on this Virgo new moon. So the actual date for the Virgo new moon is Saturday, August 27th, 2022 at 1:17 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So you can translate to whatever area code that you're in. So for some of you, it may fall on Friday, but for most of us in the world, it will fall on Saturday. And Saturday is Saturn's day. Each of the 7 days of the week are connected to the 7 visible planets and luminaries in the sky. And so having the new moon on a Saturday does bring a focus to Saturn. So we'll check in with Saturn today. And this new moon is at the 4th degree and 4 minutes of Virgo. So you can look to your chart, See if you have anything at the 4th degree in any of the signs, and that would communicate to you that this new moon is making an aspect with your natal chart. But where is Virgo in your chart? For me, I have a Virgo moon. My Virgo moon's at the 1st degree of Virgo. I have a little baby Virgo moon. So this new moon feels right at home for me. As a Virgo moon, Virgo energy is most supported by practical and meditative ritual. And the body part Virgo is connected to is the digestion and the belly. So maybe you start by just placing your hands here on the belly and taking a deep breath in. As a Virgo moon myself, learning about my digestion and bringing ease to this part of my body through meditation, through mindfulness, has changed my life. I experienced a lot of digestion problems most of my life. And a lot of it was my mental anxiety manifesting in the gut. So again, meditation and mindfulness eases the mind, but it also eases the body. So I found this photo of me. I included it in the newsletter for this podcast episode. So I release a newsletter on the new and the full moon. So if you ever want a visual to the episodes, then you can sign up for my newsletter. There's a link in the bio. But I included this photo of me from 10 years ago. It was from 2012. I was a little baby. I was 25 years old. And at this time, I was deep in my meditation and yoga practices. And I was also deep in figuring out what diet works for my body. And so what I learned during that time, studying meditation, now continues to serve me and inform so much of the information that I share with you now as an astrologer who's interested in health and healing. What I thought was cool, though, is I went back and looked at when this photo was taken from me in 2012. I'm in a meditation posture with my eyes closed, sitting on the rocks in front of the ocean. And it was actually taken during Virgo season of 2012. So I find this fascinating that I will tend to look back at photos and can feel the astrological season that it's in without even looking at the date. And I wanted to find a picture of me meditating for the newsletter, and I came across this old one from Virgo season 10 years ago. And that was right when Neptune entered Pisces. Virgo energy has been moving through a lot of spiritual, magical, mystical energy since 2011, 2012, because Virgo's polar sign is Pisces. So we will connect to that in 2 weeks on the Pisces full moon. It's important. This full moon is going to be hanging out with Neptune in the sky. So I'd like to remind you that whenever you listen to these episodes, like if you're not listening to this right on the Virgo new moon, that's totally fine. Maybe you're listening to it at some time during Virgo season, and this will help to realign you with the energy of Virgo in your life. If you are listening to this at a future date, beyond Virgo season of 2022, know that it's still here to offer you some insight into Virgo in your life. So these podcast episodes, they transcend time, but also I'm focusing on the Virgo new moon. So the new moon is a time for us to go within, right? The new moon is a time where we're starting new cycles. And I always think it's the dark night, right? So it's a time for deeper rest, setting intentions. It's a clean slate. And so having the Virgo new moon, particularly at the early degrees of Virgo, there is a sense of newness here. Virgo is the humble, holistic, hardworking healer. And in order for us to understand the new moon, we also need to understand the sun, because this is sun and moon in Virgo. When the sun's in Virgo, Virgo season, right? On the northern hemisphere, this marks the end of summer, mutable earth. And it's oftentimes referred to as harvest time or back to school. And so we had our moment to shine in Leo season. Usually during Leo season, I give myself permission to not work as hard. I still work, particularly this year because we did have Mercury and Virgo. But I like to bask in the light of the sun. And so we've had that time to shine in Leo season. And so as the sun enters Virgo, we start to feel the shifts, but it's a time to get back to work. And so Virgo is a time of year when our earthly instincts kick back in. The days are starting to get a little bit shorter. And if you wake up early, you can feel in the morning it's starting to get a little bit cooler. And so I've noticed the sun is setting like an hour earlier than it did in Leo season. And nature starts to pull back from the abundance of growing season. And so we also, too, are invited to follow suit with that more reserved and detail-oriented approach to life. And so on this Virgo new moon, we're supported when we choose a practical and gentle approach. So I wrote a list of things. Of course, Virgo is connected to writing lists. I wrote a list of things that we can do on the Virgo new moon. And so I'll read those to you. And as you listen to this list of ritual suggestions, perhaps you bring awareness to your belly and your digestion. Okay, so here is our Virgo new moon list. Set new intentions for the health of your body, mind, and spirit. Conceptualize new routines for easier flow and digestion with your day-to-day tasks. Come back home to the altar of your soul offerings. Set yourself up for success. Cultivate practices and rituals that bring about greater intentional awareness. Treat your body and the earth with reverence. Reconnect to and tend to the sacred in your life. Refine your schedule and offerings. Move your furniture and body. Cleanse your space. Dust the corners of your life. Adapt through fluid movement. Utilize your mental dexterity to serve more mindfully. With practical love, bring healing to yourself, your pets, and plants. And speaking of pets, Virgo is a sign that is connected to pets. My dog, Biji, is a Virgo, and he's on the cover of the Cosmic Cousins podcast, so you probably are familiar with his face. But he turns 2 on September 8th. So very happy birthday to little Biji, who is sleeping here right behind me on the couch. So yeah, Virgo new moon blessings to you. I have some questions for reflection for this Virgo new moon. Maybe you'll journal about them or pull tarot cards. Or maybe you'll bring them into discussion with a loved one. Right now, Mercury just entered Libra. And again, Virgo, the traditional ruling planet for Virgo is Mercury. So we always look to Mercury on the Virgo new moon, during Virgo season, when working with a Virgo's chart, whether you're a Virgo sun, moon, or rising, have any placements in Virgo, we always need to look to Mercury to understand how that Virgo is communicating. So Mercury, again, just entered Libra. So this Virgo season, there is a focus towards relationships. How are your relationships serving you? And are they? How are you collaborating, Libra, with people that you work with, Virgo? These topics are up for review because right now, Mercury is in Libra, but Mercury will station retrograde. And when is that? Mercury stations retrograde on September 9th and is retrograde from September 9th until October 2nd. So Mercury retrograde We get a lot of questions about Mercury retrograde as astrologers, and many of you are astrologers yourself. So this is a time to review. Any of the RE words, revise, particularly it's Virgo season, Mercury is going to re-enter Virgo. So this whole year, 2022, when we have Mercury stationing retrograde, it's moving from an air sign back to an earth sign. So earlier this year, in Taurus season, Mercury entered Gemini, and then it went back into Taurus. And earlier in the year, in Capricorn season, Mercury entered Aquarius, and then it went back into Capricorn. So all year, we have been going from the conceptual air element, the communicative, the intellectual, the relational air element, and taking it back to a more practical, service-oriented approach with the earth signs. So right now, with Mercury in Libra, there is a focus towards equality, social justice, relationships, and how is that bringing greater service? Going back to Virgo, how is it practical? Is it supporting your health? Maybe you're in a relationship with someone who has a different health routine than you. And so this is a time for you to revise that and come back home to yourself and your own spiritual, holistic practices. So yes, Mercury's in Libra on this Virgo new moon. So I went on a little tangent because I said I have these list of Virgo new moon questions for reflection for us. I said perhaps you communicate it with someone that you love because Mercury's in Libra. But here are the questions. What does living a more humble life look and feel like to me? What does living a more humble life look and feel like to me? This is Virgo, right? It's a sign of humility. So simplifying our life. This is something we can do on the Virgo new moon. One of the cards in the tarot associated with Virgo is the Hermit. And this is what I like to call the soul growth card for Virgo. And so I have the Fifth Spirit Tarot in front of me, which is a deck that I often work with. It is a deck for a world beyond binaries, and it is created by Charlie Claire Burgess. It's a Portland, Oregon-based tarot deck. And the Hermit in this deck, I'm absolutely in love with. It shows an older figure who is sitting on, it could be a stump or a rock. I think it's a rock, and it's snowy outside. They have long hair. They have a wide-brimmed hat on. And it looks like they're on a long hike, a long journey of sorts. And then on the tree behind them, you know, like when you carve a symbol on a tree, it's the symbol of Chiron, which is the glyph is a key. And then they're holding their hands out in a devotional offering, and there's a lantern that is like a ghost-like translucent lantern that is floating above their hands. And so Virgo is all about connecting to your inner light through alone time. So what does living a more humble life look and feel like to me is simplifying our life, giving ourselves more time to be in our aloneness. For me, living a more humble life looks like meditating more regularly, making my own food instead of eating out every meal, which I love eating out. Being of service to the community and also taking my dog on a walk a few times a day. This all looks like a humble life to me. These are some of the things I'm thinking about on this Virgo new moon, but I'd be curious what it means to you. Another question for reflection, how might I be of greater service to myself? We start there. How might I be of greater service to myself and to a world in need? And what new routines can I put in place to ensure greater overall health? These are some questions for the Virgo new moon. And our affirmation for the Virgo new moon is, I offer love and healing to every corner of my life. In the list of ritual suggestions that I had for us, I said, move your furniture and body, cleanse your space, dust the corners of your life. Also, dust the corners of your mind. This feels Virgo too. So that's where that affirmation came from, moving your furniture. For the first time, I've lived in my current apartment for a year. And for the first time, I rearranged the furniture this week. Actually, the day that the sun entered Virgo. And I completely cleaned all of the boards and the corners of the room. I am now re-inspired and also in love with my space again, because I made it a new space by changing the way the furniture looks like. I'm sharing this because this is Virgo. Virgo is mutable earth. Mutable is about movement. Earth, right, is the things that we own, our furniture. Also, moving your body. This is the time of year to move things around, to cleanse your space, to dust the corners of your life. So again, the Virgo New Moon Affirmation, I offer love and healing to every corner of my life. So, something I want to get into with you for this Virgo New Moon, and actually before we move on to that, I said I was going to talk about Saturn. So Saturn is in Aquarius right now, and the reason why is because this Virgo New Moon is on a Saturday. Saturn is at the 20th degree of Aquarius right now. So you may find that you'd like to honor Saturn on this new moon as well. And Saturn in Aquarius, we talked about at the last lunation for the Aquarius Full Moon podcast. Something interesting about Saturn in Aquarius and this new moon is that Vesta is retrograde and just re-entered Aquarius. So Vesta is one of the asteroids associated with Virgo. So I want to get into all of the different ruling planets for Virgo. And I always make it a part of my ritual during Virgo season to reconnect to the asteroids and the other planets associated with Virgo. So I'd like to get into that on this episode. But before we do that, I do have a few announcements. So the first one is that I have a new in-person offering, a new in-person gathering, and there's just a few spots left. It's called Journey to the Star, and I'm co-leading it with my friend who will be visiting Portland, Oregon, Ashley River, and it's a full day of healing and embodiment. And so we're going to be creating an intimate, deep community immersion. And the focus of the Healing Day retreat is a journey within the self. And so the retreat is centered around the energy of the star card in the tarot. So if you are wanting to learn more about this Healing Day retreat, it's going to include a tarot reading with me. You get an hour of spa time. It's going to be having vegan food from one of my favorite restaurants in Portland. And Ashley is going to be holding space, doing tattoo ritual. So it is a full-on day from like 9 to 6 on a Wednesday. And the sun will be in Virgo still, and the moon will be in Taurus. It's on September 14th of this year. And I would love to connect with you in that way in person. So if you're interested in that, again, there's a few spots left. There's a link in the show notes to that. And I'll keep it simple with that for the update there. But for now, let's transition into talking about Virgo and its many ruling planets. So out of all of the astrological signs, Virgo's ruling planets may be the most complex and may be the most varying. And so what I'm sharing with you is not a traditional viewpoint when working with astrology. So depending on what denomination of astrology you practice, Virgo's ruling planets consist of Mercury, Chiron, the moon, Ceres, Vesta, and many other asteroids. And I think that this speaks to, one, the hardworking nature of this mutable earth sign. When I look at a Virgo's chart and I look at all of these different planets, Mercury, Chiron, the moon, Ceres, Vesta, the asteroids, I feel like they're all working hard and multitasking together. And I think it is a reflection of Virgo's innate versatility to multitask, to store a lot of information, and to make sense of their need to be of service. So when working with Virgo energy, if it's a Virgo new moon, if you have any placements in Virgo in your chart, it's important to consider all of the planets and planetoids that are associated with Virgo. And this helps to see how and where Virgo may be channeling their healing gifts, and again, to make sense of their need to be of service. So we'll start with Mercury. We already checked in with Mercury because we said Mercury's in Libra on this new moon. But Mercury, Virgo is traditionally ruled by Mercury. Mercury is, on a very surface level, the planet of communication. But Mercury is more than that. Mercury is connected to divination. And the tarot, Mercury is the magician. And so as an earth sign, this makes for an interesting pairing. Virgo holds a keen awareness and understanding, this is Mercury, of the earth, of the body, of work, of the material. So this gives Virgo with the ability to share information through their body to help connect us to the practical, health-based, and service-oriented concerns of life. So look to Mercury in the chart to understand how Virgo is utilizing their mental skills, their mental dexterity, their ability to write and to communicate and to share and organize information. But also Chiron is important for Virgo too. From a more modern approach, many astrologers connect Virgo to the planetoid Chiron. Chiron's often referred to as the wounded healer, and Chiron speaks to our intellectual abilities to process, to compartmentalize, and understand our wounds and our trauma. So Chiron offers us insight into our journey of healing. And that can be a journey of spiritual healing, of psychological healing. Sometimes it can also be very physical as well. Like, I think of Chiron as chiropractor. So it speaks to the healing gifts of Virgo. And so looking to Chiron helps us understand how Virgo steps into a role as a healer, as a mentor, as a teacher. And if you're interested in learning more about Chiron, I'm going to be releasing a 4-hour workshop download on this planetoid on the upcoming Aries full moon, which is October 9th, 2022. And so I'll release more information about that Chiron workshop. People have been requesting a Chiron workshop for a few years now, so I'm excited to get into that with you. Chiron is way more than just the wounded healer. So again, sign up for the newsletter if you'd like to stay in touch with new workshops. So we've got Mercury, we've got Chiron, and now the moon. What? Virgo ruled by the moon? So from an esoteric perspective, Virgo is ruled by the moon. The esoteric rulers, from my practice and experience, I find tend to be more balancing and holistic in their approach. Sometimes they might even feel more gentle, and they also encourage soul evolution. So, for instance, if Virgo meditates with their traditional ruler, Mercury, if you are a Virgo, just think, meditating on Mercury, this planet that zips around the sun, this could exacerbate your anxiety. This could aggravate your need for perfection of details. Mercury is really resonant with Virgo, but at the same time, meditating on Mercury as a Virgo can feel almost too amplifying of Virgo's innate gifts. And so for Virgo to meditate on the moon, Virgo learns to drop out of the mind and feel more deeply into their intuition, to start to listen to the wisdom of their body, of their digestion, to allow themselves time to rest and be in self-care. So when the moon's waning, Virgo rests. And as the moon is waxing, Virgo's more productive. So this is a much more gentle approach for Virgo. For Virgo to meditate on the moon, it awakens Virgo's emotional capacities to bring healing, to bring their intuitive gifts to the world, to bring about a greater overall holistic healing temple, to connect to the temple, right? The home. Moon is the home, the temple of the body, the temple of the earth. So the esoteric rulers, for people who are more traditional in their approach to astrology, the esoteric rulers can sometimes feel really foreign and new. And for me, I find that very exciting. The asteroids are also connected with Virgo. So many of the asteroids really resonate with the Virgo archetype. And so we're not going to get into all of them, of course, because there's hundreds. But when looking at a Virgo's chart, or when better trying to understand Virgo energy or placements, it's important to consider many of the asteroids. And so, for instance, Ceres, spelled Ceres, kind of like cereal, is the asteroid of nutrition and harvesting. And Virgo is the harvester. The glyph for Ceres is a sickle, a tool that we use for harvesting. And so wherever Ceres is in our chart speaks to the ways in which we are cultivating and working hard. Particularly, part of the Ceres story is channeling one's grief through cultivation and hard work. And so, of course, we need to look to Ceres in a Virgo's chart to understand how they're harvesting. Another example is Vesta, which is the asteroid of hearth and home, and is symbolized by the flame, the eternal flame of the temple. Again, Virgo is connected to the temple. And so this Vesta will speak to the ways in which Virgo practices self-discipline and devotion towards society and towards a higher calling. So we take all of these into consideration. So let's review these planets by looking at this Virgo new moon chart to get an understanding of the energy of this Virgo new moon. So we talked about Mercury, which is currently in Libra. Mercury, again, is the traditional ruler. We know Mercury is going to station retrograde just a day before the Pisces full moon. So on September 9th is the first day of Mercury retrograde. So we're already in the shadow phase of Mercury retrograde. So again, this is encouraging us to slow down our communication, to reflect. In my own personal life, I find myself coming up to a really important decision that will shift the trajectory of next year. But I know that Mercury is in its shadow and that we're coming up on a Mercury retrograde, so I'm giving myself permission to not make any decisions until Mercury stations direct. And so that is not until the beginning of October. So essentially this whole month of September, how might we put on pause to rebalance Libra and to revise and revisit Mercury retrograde in Virgo so that we have a greater sense of clarity and understanding and perspective come Libra season. So again, we look to Mercury. We also look to Chiron. Chiron is in Aries. Chiron has been in Aries for a few years now. And Chiron, again, is the wounded healer. So during this time period, we are bringing greater healing to our very sense of self, to our identity, to our individuality. We're also bringing healing to the masculine. Aries is a sign of the masculine. So this would communicate to us that many of us are on a individual healing journey at this time. Standing up for your rights as an individual and healing deep childhood wounds. Aries is the beginning of the cycle. We're on a precipice of a new beginning. Jupiter is in Aries right now too. And this is why I'll be releasing the Chiron workshop on the Aries full moon. So we will explore this more over the coming weeks. We also said that the moon is the esoteric ruler for Virgo. So the Virgo new moon is a time, the moon is in Virgo right now, is a time for us to really reflect on and connect to this. So the moon in the tarot is the high priestess, which I find quite resonant with the hermit, which is Virgo's soul growth. So this is a time to go within. And then we said 2 asteroids. We mentioned Ceres and Vesta. So Ceres on this Virgo new moon is conjunct Venus in Leo. So Ceres and Venus are hanging out in Leo. I find this interesting because Sun in Virgo, Moon in Virgo, looks towards Mercury in Libra, and then Libra is ruled by Venus, hanging out with Ceres, the harvester in Leo. So there's also something on this new moon that is connecting us to our creativity. It's connecting us to our radiance. There also might be, depending on where Leo is in your chart, something going on with love and relationship. This is across the wheel from Saturn and Aquarius. So Saturn and Aquarius is asking us to be responsible with our greater vision, while Venus and Ceres and Leo are asking us to cultivate and harvest and tend to the soil of our heart. So there is a little bit of tension between relationship dynamics going on at this time. And again, the Virgo new moon with Mercury in Libra, and then this aspect of Venus in opposition to Saturn and Aquarius. How are you holding yourself accountable at this time? And what does that mean for the health and the flow of your relationships? And then finally, Vesta, goddess of hearth and home, connected to the temple, connected to the eternal flame. Vesta just retrograded back into Aquarius and is heading back towards Saturn and Aquarius. And so Aquarius, Vesta and Aquarius is highlighting community, the community side of Vesta's story. And so Vesta, the Vestal virgins, Virgo is the virgin archetype. So we see how Vesta, the Vestal virgins, connect us to the Virgo archetype. But the Vestal virgins gathered as a group. So Vesta and Aquarius is bringing emphasis to the sisterhood of the group, and particularly people that we gather with in devotion. So Vesta, being retrograde in Aquarius, is asking us to revisit how we gather with people over the internet, in person, if we're gathering in person. So I'm thinking about that as I prepare to lead this gathering in person here in Portland with Vesta and Aquarius. Is very supportive of coming together in a very intentional, ritualistic way in community. But again, this is all very specific to your own chart too. So just knowing what your relationship is to these signs and these energies will be helpful. And you can see Virgo is a complex sign with multitude of expressions, with a lot of gifts and skill sets. And so having all of these different planets and planetoids to connect with on the Virgo new moon, I think is helpful. Each Virgo channels their gifts through different avenues. And so this offers us a lot of vocabulary. And I would say on this Virgo new moon, perhaps you take it upon yourself to get to know these more detail-oriented, nuanced aspects and placements within your chart. And then in Virgo fashion, you can get to work on them. And so I'm wishing you a sweet Virgo new moon. Thank you as always for being here and tuning into the show. I'll just leave you on a few updates, and then I'll review some of the things that I shared with you to close this out. So just some updates from me. Nothing makes my Virgo moon in the 7th house more happy than working one-on-one with clients and students. 7th house, right? One-on-one relationships, Virgo being of service, moon in an intuitive healing way. And so right now, the offering I'm most passionate about is a 6-month astrology and tarot mentorship. And this Virgo season, this September, I'm excited to start working with 5 new individuals. So I've been spending most of August preparing to gather with them. But if working one-on-one with me is of interest to you, you can visit my website and fill out an application. I would be honored to hold space for you in that way. And in addition, if you'd like to connect with me over Zoom chat, I also offer both astrology and tarot readings, and I have new openings available for this fall of 2022. So let's review. That's all the announcements I have there. Let's review this Virgo new moon. I serve, I refine, I heal. What does living a more humble life look like and feel like to me? How might I be of greater service to myself and to a world in need? What new routines can I put in place to ensure greater overall health? Our Virgo New Moon Affirmation. I offer love and healing to every corner of my life. Deep belly breaths into the digestion. So I'd like to close this out with a little meditation exercise. And it's a simple exercise that I find helpful for grounding, for digestion, and for overall Virgo self-care. So if it calls to you and you're able, I encourage you to incorporate this practice into your Virgo season. And so maybe you even try it now if you're able to. So it involves you laying down on the earth, and particularly with your belly touching the earth. And for some of us, maybe we can't lay face down, so you could always lay on your back. But if you are able, lay down with your belly touching the earth, and then use your hands as a pillow. And you can gently turn your head to one side. And feel how your body is completely supported by the earth. Take deep, full belly breaths, filling your belly, expand into the ground. And as you inhale, you can say to yourself, I'm safe and protected by the earth. And then as you exhale, you can say, the earth supports me and meets my needs. And so as you do that, feel the weight of your body completely relax. Notice where you might be clinging and resisting. How might you more fully soften and open yourself up to receiving? And then after a few rounds of belly breaths, turn your head in the other direction and then repeat the process. Inhaling, I'm safe and protected by the earth. And exhaling, the earth supports me and meets my needs. I'm wishing for you a sweet Virgo new moon. May this new moon create space for you to realign with the humble healer that lives within. Take sweet care, cousins, and remember, deep breaths.